Good afternoon. Welcome to St. Mark's Lutheran Church. We are delighted to have you all here in attendance for our third Bach's Lunch Organ Recital. We're so grateful for St. Mark's for hosting and for you all for attending. After the performance, you're all invited to stay for a late lunch in the narthex, and we appreciate your generous donations to our organ fund. I will be starting the program today with 3 pieces. The first one is a prelude in C major by George Hume. He was a 17th and 18th century North German organist and composer. Bach was associated with him when he was a student up in Lüneburg, Germany. The prelude is going to begin with a cadenza-like pedal solo, followed by a free-form section. You're going to hear voices in conversation between the treble and the bass. That is followed by a fugue. You'll hear a subject with octave leaps, followed by descending 8th and 16th notes. It's very light and energetic. The piece ends in North German fashion with a set of flourishes. You're going to hear a bunch of rapid notes ascending in the manuals. And when I say manuals, I am talking about the keyboards that I play with my hands. As I'm sure many of you know, the organ has keys for hands and keys for the feet. So feet, pedal, hands, manuals. So enjoy the prelude in C major. The second selection is going to take us back to France, where we're going to hear a beautiful Andante by French organist Josephine Boulez, which she composed in 1898. Boulez was an organist, composer, and a professor, and she was also visually impaired. The Andante that she composed is an undulating, reflective piece. You're going to hear two separate voices playing solos, and accompanied by a string celeste. Their voices are going to alternate throughout the piece, ending in a beautiful duet. My final selection today is Variations on Allein Gott in der Oid sei by John Peter Sweensveling. He was a Dutch organist in the 16th and early 17th centuries. He was a composer and a pedagogue. He had students from all across Europe. Many of his pieces, we don't actually have scores that he wrote in his own hand. The reason we have his music is his students copied it. And so we have many of his students' copies of his works. And so he was known for his variations on chorales and on secular tunes. He even wrote arrangements based on tunes his students brought him from France or southern Germany. So he's a very fascinating person. The piece I'm playing today, Allen Gott in der Oid sei it translates to all glory be to God in high. It was sung as the Gloria in the German Mass following the Reformation, and we still sing it today. It's in our hymnal in the ELW. Chris probably knows the number, but you can look it up in the red hymnal if you'd like to. Many composers, including Johann Sebastian Bach, wrote settings of this tune. And Sveling's settings that I'm playing today, there's 4 variations. The first one, you're going to hear 4 voices. The second variation is a duet. The third is going to have the melody in the tenor voice. And then the fourth returns to 4 voices in an energetic finale.
Good afternoon. This first selection you'll hear that I'm playing by Pachelbel, the Toccata in E minor, is written in the Middle Baroque era, and it's one of Pachelbel's most recognized works besides his famous Canon in D. Pachelbel's toccatas are generally characterized as free, improvisatory opening sections featuring fast manual passages over sustained pedal tones. This work engages passages and sequences that make it a notable piece among his organ compositions, with its dramatic, two-voiced consecutive sixths, thirds, or tenths interacting over sustained pedal points. Johann Pachelbel was a prominent German Baroque composer, organist, and teacher. His music was highly popular during his lifetime, and he was considered one of the great organ masters of his generation. During this time period, Pachelbel helped establish the tradition and concepts of the South German composition influenced by Italian masters like Girolamo Frescobaldi. The earliest known publication of this work dates to 1903, long after its composition in the late 17th or early 18th century. In high school band, that's called a stinger. The second piece is the fugue in C major, often referred to as the jig fugue. This fugue, written by Buxtehude, is well known for its lively, spirited, dance-like character, typical of North German style of composition. It is contrapuntal in style, and the fast tempo and lilting rhythm give it the character of a jig, a popular dance form of the time. While composed for organ, it is highly playable and frequently performed on the harpsichord. Dietrich Buxtehude was a Danish-German organist and one of the most important composers of the mid-Baroque period. During his tenure as organist in Lübeck, Germany, he organized a series of musical performances which attracted musicians from diverse places. The recital series he instituted remained in place from 1673 to 1810. Our series here should last so long. Bach famously walked the 250 miles from Arnstadt to Lübeck to hear Buxtehude play and, quote, comprehend one thing and another about his art. Buxtehude is regarded as primarily a keyboard composer, and his surviving church music is praised for its high musical qualities rather than its progressive elements.
After last month, you're probably expecting the Thanksgiving turkey. I'm Chris Mickelson. I'm a former organist here at St. Mark's. I got a little carried away with program notes, so I'm not going to read all of them. We'd be here all afternoon. But it's all my pieces are based on the hymn, Now Thank We All Our God, which is a pretty popular and well-known hymn throughout Christian denominations. I would just point out that the hymn came out of the 16th century, which involved the 30 Years' War and the plague. So it was a very turbulent time. The Catholics and the Lutherans were taking up arms against each other, and then the Calvinists got involved, and then the Holy Roman Empire was still a thing, and there were all these kingdoms and principalities, bishoprics and such. So it was a pretty messy time, and a lot of these musicians and artists suffered during that time, but they kept going. This hymn was, I talk about 5 individuals. The first one is Martin Rinkhart, who wrote the words, and a hymn is words, words that are meant to be sung. But it wasn't until about 10 years later that Krüger, who wrote many, many of our beautiful, well-known hymns, wrote a tune for those words. And then it wasn't until 2 centuries later that Catherine Winkworth translated the German into English. And many of those hymns made it into our American hymnals because they were ready-made for us, really. The Americans didn't have to do much. Catherine Winkworth did it all. And then came Bach, who was very inspired by this hymn, with many hymns. A lot of his music is hymn-based. So I'm going to start by just pointing out some things in my notes, starting on the second page with the second bullet. This tune and its complementary text inspired a young German musician to compose an organ prelude, which is a hymn introduction, to amplify, embellish, and exalt the words and thus engage the waiting, listening, and decidedly motley congregation to open their throats and exalt their God with high thanksgiving for such bountiful goodness. That's kind of lofty speech, but imagine all these peasants crammed into a church singing these hymns. Hopefully they were inspired. Bach did get some feedback from the congregation, especially when he came back from visiting Buxtehude with all kinds of fanciness that drove the congregation crazy. They couldn't figure out where he was and what he was doing and when to come in. That young man was Johann Sebastian Bach. The first of the pieces I'm going to play is one of the 18 great chorales, or Leipzig 18, which was probably written about 1708 when he was in his early 20s, though they were not gathered into a collection until his later years. The second is a transcription of the third movement of Bach's cantata number 79, Gott der Herr ist Sonn und Schild, first performed on Reformation Day on October 31st, 1725. In the cantata, the movement was sung by the choir and accompanied by a small orchestra, which included horns and trumpets, which you will readily hear when I play the piece. And I'm going to make you sing again, like I did last time. So if you would turn to hymn number 840, you'll see what we're about to sing. Now thank we all our God, nun danket alle Gott. After we sing the hymn, we'll sing it first in F, and then I will modulate up to G, so please feel free to sing in parts if you like. Altos and basses will probably want to at least drop down for the last stanza. That is the same key the chorale is in, the Bach chorale. The prelude is 4 voices, just like in a choir. For the melody in the soprano, I will use what is called a cornet, C-O-R-N-E-T, which includes 8-foot, 4-foot, 2-foot, 2 2/3, and 1 3/5 stops. The ones with the fractions are not in the octave, but they add color as they emphasize upper harmonics. And it's never used alone. It's called a sesquialtera, 2, which means 2 ranks, because 2 pipes are sounding at once. I should really demonstrate that if I have time. Let me play an 8-foot C, and then I'll play the first harmonic, which is the octave and a 5th above that, which would be a G, and then another 6th above that is an E, so it would sound like. This is a sesquialtera. It tends to blend in the upper range. I think you heard that as I played it. So that's your registration lesson for today. The accompanying voice is the alto, tenor, and bass. I'll play on an 8-foot flute and a 4-foot principal with a 16-foot added in the pedal. On this piece, which is really a very challenging piece, at least for me, the feet play the bass line, which is usual. The left hand straddles both the bass and the treble staff, playing both the tenor and alto voices on a separate manual. Each phrase of the chorale is introduced by the opening notes of the phrase. So you hear dum, bum, 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 and it comes in turn in the lower 3 voices before it's announced in the cornet up above in the soprano atmosphere. The transcription from the cantata is by C.H. Trevor, Caleb Henry Trevor. He was Oxford educated. He was basically a self-trained organist, and he also became a prominent teacher and music editor and held a number of prestigious positions across England. His Oxford Organ Method of 1971 became an overnight bestseller, believe it or not. He taught some notable organists, including Simon Preston, who's a name you might recognize. But I wanted to give recognition to the editor. Editors and arrangers, sometimes they're in the footnotes, and they don't get recognized enough. So for this transcription, which I'm going to play this all without interruption, from hymn to Bach to the cantata transcription. For the transcription, I am taking up the big guns. The accompaniment will be played using the principal chorus with reeds, which include trumpet and trombone, or pazzauna. The chorale, which is sung by the choir in the cantata, will be melody only, and that will be on the big trumpets here, the horizontal trumpets. On our organ, it doesn't have a very fancy name. It's called solo trumpet. On many organs, it's called the trompette en chamade. And en chamade, interestingly enough, denotes a military signal to parley or surrender, so it's like a bugle call. These pipes are aimed like cannons right at you. And I did receive a warning this past week when I was practicing that I was reaching decibel levels that were not good for my ears. But the pipes are directly above the organist's head, so that it's also called a trompeta real in Spanish, which originally is thought to have meant real trumpet because they look like real trumpets, but later it was taken to mean royal trumpet, so more function than the characteristics of the pipe. And at the very end, I will turn on the 32-foot stops. We do not have 32-foot pipes in this organ. So we have two speakers over here that produce the sound for those deep notes, and you will feel them. So we'll begin after I get set up here with singing through the hymn. I'm going to play a chord before I blast into the last piece, just to give you a warning. And I will not be offended if you plug your ears. It is loud. Anyway, so enjoy. One more thing, I promise. I'm dedicating my performance to my first organ professor of Valparaiso, William Eifrig. On November 1st, the day after our last recital, I received the American Association of Lutheran Church Musicians newsletter. And there on the list of those who were being remembered was my organ professor. And he is the last. I mean, my parents are gone. All those aunts and uncles who used to populate our living room are gone, and many cousins, and many of my mentors, these men and women who inspired me in my training, and always really in the back of my thoughts as I practice. I told them the last time I saw he and my other professor, Philip Caring, that there was one looking over each shoulder, encouraging me and sometimes scolding me. And I often had to ask forgiveness for wrong notes, as I do sometimes with the composers I play. But so to Bill Eifrig, may his memory be happy. It is in my mind. One more.